In Hearts of Iron 4, there are tons of special projects, land, air, naval, even nuclear, that you can unlock if you have the right breakthroughs and facilities. Today, we're going to break them all down and rank them by how useful and overpowered they really are. Let's immediately get this one out of the way. Flame tanks are awesome and virtually always worth pursuing. If you watched any of my template videos, you probably noticed that they belong in basically any offensive division. Not only are they extremely cheap, but also enable you to stack breakthrough, which is incredibly important and difficult to get, especially on special forces or infantry. The main use of them though is that they give you incredibly overpowered terrain modifiers, with the medium flame tank ones being quite a lot better than those of the heavy and light flame tank. You can even upgrade them in the research tab, and they also get better through researching engineers. Overall, this is just a clear 5-star special project, and it basically belongs in any offensive division. Military engineering vehicles are also awesome, although significantly worse than the medium flame tanks, due to there being great alternatives, namely pioneers for your marines and engineers for basically all other divisions. That being said, the extra terrain modifiers the Armored Assault Company grants are awesome and definitely worth pursuing for your tanks or for other offensive divisions. Military engineering vehicles also have other uses, most important, the Armored Engineering Support Company, which is quite useful for defensive divisions like D-Day Mech, since it gives the most entrenchment out of any support company in the game. Overall, I'd give this company 4 stars. It is nice to have, but it's not a must-have like flame tanks. Also, they were the final blow that it took to kill terrain from the game completely, since you virtually don't suffer any terrain penalties anymore if you properly stack all modifiers ever since they have been added. Land cruisers are what super heavy tanks wanted to be. They basically enable you to gain ridiculous stats on your units, and they allow you to armor meme against enemy divs. With the huge downsides of being incredibly hard to get, also that they are quite expensive, and lastly that they give you huge terrain debuffs. Because of this, their main use, if allowed by the rule set, would be to armor meme defensive divisions like those stationed on D-Day Wall. Because of the big downsides though, I will just give them 3 stars, I think. They have their usages, but they are not that common. Super Heavy Howitzers are the next great support company. They offer a bunch of soft attack, are compared to other special projects quite easy to get, and they aren't that expensive. In MP they are often used in Marines or Mechanized, but they are viable in virtually every unit that needs a bunch of soft attack. I think 4 stars would be a fine rating for them. Self-propelled super heavy howitzers are pretty much the same as normal super heavy howitzers, just that they are harder to get, but also offer more soft attack. Because of that, I must actually rate them lower than the normal super heavy howitzers, since these ones rarely ever see action in MP, because they are so hard to get. Overall though, just as super heavy howitzers, they're a solid support company, therefore I will give them 3 out of 5 stars. The super heavy railway guns are pretty busted. Just like normal railway guns, they reduce the enemy stats in combat, just that these ones are quite a bit stronger. Also note that you get one of them spawned once you finish the special project. Quite a few special projects offer that in some capacity, but here it is especially strong. In SP, they are not worth pursuing in the vast majority of cases, with a few potential exceptions like Soviets, but in MP they are beasts. If they are in the game, you basically always need a dedicated super heavy railway gun miner. On the allies, typically South, Australia or New Zealand, and on the Axis that would typically be Romania. That dedicates a good chunk of the eco to building them, so that you have them on the most important choke points of the map, like El Alamein or India. Because of this, I will also give them 4 stars, I think. Multi-charge large caliber guns are kind of okay, but typically not worth the investment. They're basically rocket silos and allow you to bomb the enemy's logistics. You can do some funny things with them, like bombing the UK or the Axis across the English Channel, but overall, due to them costing a lot and not being that efficient, I'll only give them 2 stars. They're fine, but certainly not overpowered in any way. Stronghold networks are not that good. They offer some decent buffs to supply and increase enemy attrition, but are insanely expensive overall. They also allow you to increase your fort level higher than usual, but that is honestly not as good as you may think, since forts can be penetrated quite easily if you know what you are doing. Attacking from multiple sides with railway guns, flame tanks and a fortress buster general renders forts virtually useless. Also, forts can just be bombed out if they are too big of a problem, but either way, this company is not all that great. but due to it offering some meme potential, I think I'll give it 2 stars as well. Bouncing bombs unlock dam rating and are not that useful. Most raids are not that important, but dam raids specifically are really not as great as that you need a dedicated special project towards it. Overall, I think I just give this one 1 out of 5 stars. Earthshaker bombs allow you to perform raids on multi-large caliber guns, which as discussed earlier aren't that great to begin with, so again, this will also get 1 out of 5 stars. Intercontinental bombers really only serve the purpose of enabling you to bomb over enemies regardless of how far away they are. The problem is obviously though that you can't just escort these bombers, because your escort fighters will not have range. And in most other metrics they're inferior to normal bombers, so I'll just give them 2 out of 5 stars due to them having some meme potential. Motherships are basically just fighters that are extremely expensive, have a lot of range, and give a bunch of air superiority. Sadly though, they don't trade well with the meta fighter designs in direct combat if adjusted for IC losses. Partially that is because you can't apply an MIO to them. They are also relatively resource intensive, and for all of these reasons combined, I will just give them yet again 2 stars. Jet engines give a decent amount of thrust to your fighters, while also giving a bunch of extra speed, with the only downside being that they destroy your range. If you have seen my air guide, you probably remember that range is one of the most important stats for your airplane, therefore making jet engines useless, with the exception of heavy fighters, since those can take the dip in range. Therefore, the only meta plane design that uses any form of jet engine is also the US Heavy Fighter. Because most air projects are garbage, I will give this one 4 stars, since it is one of the few air projects that is actually part of the meta. Axial jet engines work in basically the same way as normal jet engines do, but they are quite a lot harder to get, since it requires you to already have normal jet engines, which already need 3 air breakthroughs. And then you need another 2 to start going for them. So overall you need 4 air breakthroughs to get them, and even then they are only marginally better than normal jet engines. Therefore, I think I can just give them 3 stars, since they are not really used in the multiplayer meta at all, but I guess in single player you can do some funny things with them. Supersonic jets require you to have axial jet engines and 2 more air breakthroughs, so you need 7 air breakthroughs overall to even begin researching them. And while they do trade well, it's virtually impossible to get them in any meaningful time frame. Therefore, they get 3 stars as well. Helicopters are quite nice, and some nations even start with them. They offer you access to some quite decent support companies, mainly the helicopter logi companies and the helicopter field hospitals. Both of them are pretty good and worth going for. I wouldn't hardtech or rush either of these though. But if you can get them, there's no reason to skip out of them. Overall, solid 4-star project. Radar is a really important special project, since radar stations are really important to find and beat enemy submarines, and they also improve air trades. They also increase intel on your enemy, which then again boosts your combat stats. In addition, they also provide you with some information about the enemy's divisions, which can be useful on D-Day as just one example, to see when they are invading and how many units they have prepared. Overall, this company is a 5 out of 5 star company, since it's probably the most used air warfare project. There are several types of rockets that can be unlocked through the air warfare facility, namely flying bombs, ballistic missiles, medium-range ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and surface-to-air missiles. Since all of these are fired off of rocket silos, I'll go over them and rank them all together, since they aren't all that useful or different. So let's start with flying bombs. Flying bombs work analogous to strat bombers, also being able to be shot down by AA and intercepted by fighters. Ballistic and medium-range ballistic missiles work in the same way, with the difference that they can't be shot down. ICBMs are just there to drop nukes over long ranges, more on that later. Surface-to-air missiles work in virtually the same way that static anti-air does. Overall, none of these are really all that great. They're expensive to get, take away a lot of research speed, and require a bunch of breakthroughs. Therefore, I'll award all of the rocket 2 stars only. Rocket interceptors are also largely useless, offering you an engine that gets bonus agility on interception, but also nukes your air range. This is really quite useless, especially considering that it is a late game tech and therefore only gets 1 star from me. Cruiser submarines offer you incredible range, which makes them useful to raid enemy trade routes in deep oceans that are hard to protect, especially as Japan in the Pacific. They also have relatively low visibility comparable to that of a 1940 submarine, with the only real downside being that they are quite expensive. I think this deserves at least 3 stars. Fleet submarines are probably the best submarine in the game, having more range than the cruiser submarine while having even less visibility. For that reason, I'll give them 4 stars as well. Nuclear submarines have more than twice the HP of a 1936 submarine, but sadly, also they are incredibly expensive. They do, however, have an incredibly low visibility, and while I think they aren't bad, they don't have all that much usage and are more of a late game tech, so I'd give them 3 out of 5 stars. Missile launching submarines and nuclear missile submarines enable you to do raids, including dropping nukes on enemy targets from your submarines. None of the raids can only be done for either of those though, so I think that in most cases this is not that useful overall, so I just give this 1 out of 5 stars I think. Nuclear torpedoes are a module that gets unlocked for your submarines. It is the strongest torpedo by far, but it also costs a lot more than any of the other torpedoes. In my opinion, it's rarely ever worth it, and that's why I would just give it 2 out of 5 stars. Midget submarines are interesting because they offer a very low visibility and cost almost nothing, with the only issue being that they have virtually no HP and are also extremely slow with little to no range. Outside of a very few niche scenarios where you actually just plan on raiding sea zones very close to you, I typically avoid them. But because it does have its uses, I will give it 3 out of 5 stars. Air-independent propulsion allows you to lower the visibility of your submarines, while lowering the range and making them significantly more expensive. But because visibility is the crucial stat for submarines, I'd say that if you have a breakthroughs, go for it. 4 out of 5 stars. Pretty much the same applies to anechoic tiles. They lower the visibility while making your submarine cost more. A big bottleneck of them is though that they cost 2 rubber per dockyard. As long as that's not an issue for you on nations like maybe Japan or the UK, I'd recommend going for them. Because of that, I'll also give them 3 out of 5 stars. Torpedo cruisers are just not good, largely because torpedoes overall are not that useful, making them more or less useless because they are completely dependent on torpedoes. 1 out of 5 stars. Super heavy battleships are the meta ship other than light cruisers. They're very strong and certainly worth going for as the US to trade boost your allies while building great ships, but also as some other nations like Japan. They are also relatively easy to get, so 5 out of 5 stars. Modern battleships are decent, but super heavy battleships are equal or better in most aspects, especially if you consider that you can get them way faster and easier. 2 out of 5 stars for that reason. Modern carriers are really great if you could get them in time, but you can't, and therefore they just aren't that good overall. Despite it being theoretically a decent ship, I'll have to give it 2 out of 5 stars for that reason. Ice aircraft carriers are even harder to get, but if you do manage to get them, you can do some absurdly broken shit since they're the strongest carriers by far. Due to the extra meme potential, I'll just give them 3 stars, even though they are also basically impossible to get for your average game. Underway replenishment increases the range from the nearest port in which your navy can be supplied. Problem is just that it takes a bunch of convoys and just overall isn't strong enough. It's certainly not the war special project and actually has some usage, so I'm gonna just give it 3 stars. The proximity fuse special project just gives a flat 25% AA buff to your ships. This is honestly extremely strong, especially if paired with high AA ships like super heavy battleships. Since it's a passive as well and doesn't require you to build anything, I think it deserves 4 stars. Nuclear reactors are needed to build nukes, so if you want nukes, you gotta build them. While it's hard to rank that, I just give it 3 stars just because I think nukes overall are not that great anymore. Commercial nuclear reactors work just like normal nuclear reactors, allowing you to produce nukes. However, they also offer the benefit of giving a modifier to construction, resources, and building slots to the state in which you build it in. It's quite nice, but mostly not worth it, since it also costs more IC, 5,000 more IC I think. So 2 out of 5 stars for that reason. Nuclear engines just make your ship require 0 fuel. It's good, but considering how hard it is to get, it's just a big nothing burger. I'd almost always skip it and save a breakthrough for more important things. 1 out of 5 stars. Nuclear fission bombs are just normal nukes. They're easier to get than thermonuclear bombs, but the fallout induced by dropping them also lasts only half as long, and most negative modifiers they produce are also just half as strong as those from thermonuclear bombs. Nonetheless, these are the nukes you're going to be dropping in most games that you will have. And therefore, I just give them 3 out of 5 stars. They're way easier to get than thermonuclear bombs, but also significantly weaker. Some countries like the US can do a day 1 rush, but other than that, they aren't really viable in MP. Thermonuclear bombs take longer and are harder to get than normal nukes, but also create a way worse lasting impact. The problem is that they're an incredible late game tech, but if you get some of these, you can actually demolish large parts of the enemy industry if you drop them on the proper states. But due to them only being a meme and virtually impossible to get in most games, I can just give them 2 out of 5 stars. Nuclear warheads enable you to deliver nukes through rocket silos and submarines. They have a way higher hit chance than strategic bombers, which is kind of good, so if it really gets into the late game, and you have been hard-taking nukes, you may as well go for it. Due to this being a really niche scenario though, this also can't get more than 2 stars.